Welcome back to part 2 of our brief intro to while loops. In this video, we're going to cover breaks, some Boolean conditions, and some infinite loops. In our previous intro to while loops video, we covered 2 scenarios, counting up to 10 from 0 and counting down from 10 to 0. And in this scenario, we're going to count down to negative 100 from 10, and we're going to look at a couple different ways of doing this. I'm going to start a new file here, and I'm calling it while3.py because it's our third scenario. So we'll start it just like our other one. We're going to count down to negative 100 from 10. So that means we're starting at 10. That means we could start off with n equals 10 as a variable. And then we'll start off our while condition. And the easiest scenario we could use is use n is greater than or equal to negative 101. We want to get down to negative 100. We want that one to print out. So we're going to start off with that first. So that's our condition. And we'll put a colon, and then we'll indent so it's part of our loop, and we'll first of all we'll just print n, so that should print all the numbers as we go down, and the first number that it should print is 10, so we're going to start with 10. So we're going to start with that one, and then we're just going to decrement or count down, and we'll just do minus equals 1, so that'll count down from 1, and that's our shorthand for n equals n minus 1. And let's just see how this works. This should work okay. And that works fine. It starts at 10 and it goes all the way down to negative 101. Although in this case, this one could be 100. In some cases, we're going to have to switch this around. But in this case, since we're saying equals and we are printing first, that's okay. So that's going to work out okay. So if we tried it one more time here, then it would only go down to a negative 100 since it is equal to that. So that's our first scenario. So that works out okay. Now, another scenario we can do here, which is kind of interesting, and I'm just going to work on this one, so I won't keep this one here. I'm just going to say while true. Now, this creates a condition that's while true is always true unless something makes it false. So in this case, what we're creating here is basically an infinite loop, or sometimes it's called an indefinite iteration, but it's an infinite loop that's going to happen here, meaning if we're saying while true, there's a condition that's true and it never stops and becomes false, this will keep going down and down and down and it'll never stop. So let's see what happens here. And you got to be careful. Sometimes this could crash your computer, but in here, we're just going to hit our little trash can and VS Code to stop it. And there it goes. You can see it's going really fast and we can't even get to the top to even see what happens. And I haven't found a way to even stop it to look at our code to kind of break it in between, other than just hitting this thing to stop it. So that's an infinite loop. We don't want that to happen because that could create problems on your computer and it's not really valuable for anything having it just count and count like that forever. So one thing you'd have to do now that we have this true condition, how do we end this true condition? Well, if we know that we want to end at negative 100, we can actually put an if condition in here. We could put another condition inside our while loop and say if n, and we could just say equals negative 100. We'll see if we need to use 101, but we'll start from there. So we'll put another condition inside here, and notice this has to be indented, and everything after the colon here has to be indented again. It's kind of a nested kind of conditional statement inside this loop. But what's going to happen when we get to this number then, we could put in a break statement, and break, like we said before in another video, will break out of this loop and just kind of end what's going on here. So it'll keep repeating this. Well, actually, it'll run 3 lines of code. It'll print the first, whatever it is, 10. Then it'll decrement it, and it'll make it 9. And then it'll say, does 9 equal negative 100? And if it doesn't, it'll just ignore that and go back and keep doing it again. And it'll keep doing it until this condition is true. Once this condition is true of n equaling negative 100, then it'll break the loop and it'll finally end. So let's see how this one works. And there it is. This one goes down to negative 99, and it starts at 10, so that's exactly what we want. So we could put this at 101 if we wanted to print out 100. So what's happening here, it's breaking after it gets to that particular number. That's why it didn't print out the 100 the first time. We have to wait till it gets to 101. That way it already prints out the 100 before that, and we're just going one number past. So it's stopping the loop. Now, when you see the break here, you might say, well, if this is while true, what if we just said false? What if we just put in false here as a condition? It's showing up blue. That seems okay. Is that going to work? Well, let's see what would happen here. And there's our infinite loop again. So obviously this isn't working, so I'll stop this. And what's happening here, it's basically saying once you get to that number, it's creating a condition of false, but that doesn't mean this while condition is false. It just means this if condition is creating a false condition that isn't really affecting the loop itself. So this isn't affecting the loop. We can control the way the loop is. If we have a condition of the loop that's true, and then we turn that condition of the loop false, then that would work. Like, for example, if we said while C, we'll just put C for condition. We'll say equals true. And then when we got to this number, we said C equals false. Now, we don't have to put equals here because we're just redefining the variable. We have a variable that's originally equal to true. Now, actually, before I do this, I'm going to do this and we're going to get an error. Now, the reason we're going to get an error is because we don't have C defined yet. But if you forgot, it doesn't hurt to just try it out. We're going to get an error here because C is not defined yet. We just have it determining if it's true. We're saying while it's true, make it false, but we never said what it starts as. So it needs to start with a variable named C with a value of true. And it would just be equals true. You wouldn't have to put equals. Remember, the only time you want to use equals is when you're kind of determining equality between two different things. This is giving it a value. This is also giving it a value. But for the if and for the while, they're determining if something equals one or the other, if C is the same as true, if N is the same as negative 101. But these are kind of redefining the variable. So what we're doing here, we're saying once it gets to negative 101, then we're going to turn C and make it be false. So this is running while C is true. Then once this is false, it should do the same as the break. And let's see what happens here. And it worked the same way as the break. It did the same thing. This if condition in here, basically we turned C to false. Now it was a little more code because we had to make a variable that said C equals true, and then we had to indicate that C equals true, that while C has a value of true, then you're going to do this, and then when it's not, then it's going to stop the loop. Now from the previous video, one situation we had was actually we had something, it was with a number, it was like while N. Here if we do while C, now what's going to happen here if we say while C, because C starts off as true, if we say while C, it's going to stay in that true condition until we make it false. So this should work too. We don't even have to say C equals true. We could just say while C, because it's inherent that it's already true. We already indicated and gave it a value of being true, so that value is not going to change until something else occurs. And we had that situation in the previous video with numbers, with integers, where if it was a positive number, it was indicated this N is 10 was kind of inherently true because it's a positive number, and if it was 0, it would be kind of false. So here, we're already indicating that C is true. So nothing's going to change that until we say it's false. So let's see what happens here. And it should do the same thing. So that's what it did. It did the same thing by just saying while C. So it just saves a little bit of code that you have to write in here because we already indicated that C is true, and then we turn C false down here. So I think that's all we're going to do with our while loop right now. I don't want to do too much with this scenario. We covered a couple different options here. The infinite loop, we looked at a break statement, and we also, by turning the while condition into false, by making sure the condition is turning false here, we also stop the loop. There's different ways to do this. There's a continue, which will actually start the loop over again, which we've addressed a little bit in previous videos, and we'll deal with more of the while loop as we encounter this, but these two videos are really just an intro, just to get you a little bit familiar with it. And also, one thing I want to point out here, here's some great reading. I'll give a little shout out to realpython.com. They have a really fantastic article about while loops, so it's definitely worth checking out for all the little details that I may have missed in this video, but hopefully you can look at some of this if you have any questions as well. So that's part 2 of our brief intro to while loops. Thanks for checking us out.